Hello and welcome to the fifth lecture in this series where we are going to start talking about HTML basics. Before we begin with the basics of HTML, I want us to go ahead and create a folder called text where we will be putting all our text files, and also we are going to name this file index.html. So we'll begin first by launching our advanced new file plugin. Then we create a folder called test like this. Then in it will be index.html. Good. So as we can see visually, we now have a folder called test. Then in the folder we have index.html. Now the first thing you do when you're working with an HTML document is to declare a document type. A doc type declaration just tells the browser the version of HTML you're using, and it gives you more information about the page or the web document you're working with. That is in a very basic sense. So to declare a document type, I'm just going to use my emmet to do this, and then I'll explain what is actually happening on the page. Now first is a document type declaration this way, and we call this a tag in HTML. Everything that looks like a less than and a greater than and with a content inside of it is a tag in HTML. Now we have opening tags and closing tags. Some of the tags have opening tags and closing tags. This is an example of a tag that does not have a closing tag. But if we take a look at the head tag, we can see that the head tag has a close tag. Close tags are written with a / before the word in itself. And our meta tags just give more information about the page to either search engines or the browser or third-party applications. The title tag is a tag that we can see visually, or whatever we write in between this can be seen visually on the browser's tab or title tabs. So I'm just going to write basics of HTML here. Then I'll save this, turn on my autosave, and also go ahead and open it in the browser. And as you can see that for this demonstration, I'm using Mozilla Firefox Developer Edition, which matches perfectly with the theme that I'm using for my Sublime text. Now back to the title tag, we can see the title right here, and that is the function of what we have written in the title tag. If we change this, then we should expect this to change as well. We should however take note that because we are targeting a project, or this course is basically about getting you up and running without first exposing you to a lot of things to learn, which makes everything boring, we will not be covering everything, because loading yourself with too much information in the beginning is actually what gets people to quit this whole thing. So we are just going to study the tags and the codes that will be very essential to the footer that we'll be developing at the end of the day. So that said, let's get down to this body tag. What does this body tag do? Well, but then before we even talk about the body tag, let's just talk a little about the HTML tag. The HTML tag just tells the browser that whatever we write in between it is going to be an HTML or a set of HTML codes. And then it has language here, which tells us that the codes will be in English and not any other language. Now to the body tag. As we can see that when we head back to the browser, we can't see anything displaying on the page as of this moment. Now the purpose of the body tag is to hold everything that we are writing on the page, the things that we can see as users of the system or viewers of the website. All those things will be written inside the body tag. Now before we continue, I want us to talk about HTML commenting. What is a comment? Comments are made for developers to easily remember portions of code. So if I'm developing, I can choose to put a comment of how maybe I did something at a section, so that later when I'm reading the code, I can remember that, oh, okay, this is what I did here. So to comment in HTML, you first begin with a less than, then with your exclamation mark, 4 dashes in the middle this way, then you close it this way. Now you write anything that you write after the first 2 dashes becomes your comment, okay? And this cannot be rendered by the browser. The browser does not actually render this. It sees it as non-relevant, and it can only be read by the human being who is reading the code. When we begin with the basics of CSS3, we'll learn how to comment in CSS. HTML is a markup language in the sense that it's not actually a programming language that can create too much logic. So we use it to format a document. That said, in formatting a document, we sometimes come across terms like paragraphs, spans, divs and all that, divs, sections, articles, and all that. And trust me, those things can be found here in HTML as well. Some of these tags come with default styles and some do not come with default styles. So for example, the paragraph like this comes with some sort of default style. Whatever I write in between these two paragraphs become the visible object on the page. So if I went ahead to write this is the first paragraph and save this, go ahead to the browser and refresh, we should see something like this is the first paragraph. Good. Now what if I went ahead and then I copied this and then paste it for the second time? But this time I'm just going to change the content to this is the second paragraph and refresh. All we can see is that the second paragraph is beginning on a new line, which is even telling us that there's some sort of formatting. As we can see, there is a space in between them. When we begin learning about how to style our HTML documents with CSS, we'll get to appreciate all these things about paddings and margins that come with some tags. Now from paragraphs, the next thing I want us to take a look at is the div. Divs are just generic elements that help us to create content on the page. Now divs don't necessarily come with any default styles like border or things that are visually appealing. They're just rectangular boxes which in the beginning do not have any style. So if I went ahead to refresh my page, you can see that the div is not showing, but it's there. It's not showing because it does not have a content. But what if we give it the content of this is the first div? Save this document and then we refresh the page. We can see this is the first div. Now all HTML tags are rectangular boxes on the page. If we want to see this visually, we can do it when we get to the CSS section of the course. And in this course, we would be using divs a lot. The next is a span. The span tag, just like the div, is also a generic element, just that the span tag is an inline element and not a block level element. Inline elements are elements that can be written in one line, whereas the block level elements are elements that need to be on a fresh line each time they are called into play. But with the help of CSS, we can even change inline elements to block level elements and block level elements to inline elements. So as we can see, the paragraphs are block level elements in the sense that after the first paragraph, declaring the second paragraph, this one pushed it down here because it's already occupying from here to here if it's a rectangular box on the page. Also, divs are block level elements. But what if we give the span a content? This is the first span. And then we save this, move to the next line. Now this very first span is showing on the next line because the div has pushed it down. The div already has occupied the space here. But what if we go ahead and declare second span and just change the content to second span? Refresh our browser. As you can see, this does not begin on a new line, but is still on the same line, giving us the impression that this is an inline element. Now, moving away from spans, we want to treat the footer tag. The footer tag is also a generic tag, but makes semantic sense, or it has some sort of semantic to it. It makes logical sense in development. The work of the footer tag can also be done by the div tag and some other tags. But when you are writing your code, you can see that later when you're reading, you can come to this block and say, oh, okay, this is my footer section of the document. So let me just go ahead and give this a content. This is the first footer. Then we go ahead to refresh the browser and still we have another new element. So given that we have covered some few tags in this section, we'll leave the other tags for the next video. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.